There it is, Treyarch's first true masterpiece. I mean, I say this even though I would say World at War is probably my favorite Call of Duty in the series, and that I have a soft spot for Call of Duty 3. I mean, those games were great, but they weren't peak. I mean, World at War is really just Call of Duty 4 in a World War II setting, and Call of Duty 3 is just weird. But eventually Treyarch would really hit their stride and come into their own with the release of Call of Duty Black Ops in 2010. And there was no better time for this to happen since this game was the follow-up act to the monstrous hit that was Modern Warfare 2. That meant that there were many fans who were hungry for more, and Treyarch responded by serving them up something truly special. And with that prelude all out of the way, let's start this thing off by taking a look at the story, setting, and characters that Treyarch had crafted for this game. Beginning with the setting, it's not a rehash of World War II again, or a modern setting, but rather the Cold War era 1960s, which it's a bit of a gamble to move away from the stuff that we're used to, but it was also, you didn't want to do the same stuff again, so it made sense for them to do it, even if it is less conventional of an option. And this game sticks to that unconventionality by not sticking itself to one war. It jumps around the whole decade from the invasion of Cuba to special ops in Russia, and yes, it does have a few missions that take place in the Vietnam War. Another piece of this game's story that's done unconventionally is the fact that it's not told straightforwardly. That is because the game is mainly told through Mason's perspective via flashbacks because he is being interrogated by unknown assailants who want to know what the numbers mean. Now for the story itself, as it follows a group of CIA agents attempting to stop a Soviet plot to invade America. But before all this can happen, the main character, Alex Mason, is captured during the botched invasion of Cuba and is taken to a Soviet prison where he is put under experimental testing for mind control. After escaping with the help of war veteran Viktor Reznov, he finds himself back in the United States face to face with JFK, giving him his next mission. Now from here on out, the story basically follows Mason and his cohorts, Frank Woods, Weaver, Bowman, and Hudson, as they try to hunt down the three men who are responsible for the mind control and the plot against America. These three men being Dragovich, Kravchenko, and Steiner. Partway into this assignment, Mason reconnects with Reznov, who he had thought died during the prison break. Now I'm gonna go ahead and stop the plot summary right there, since I'm assuming not everyone watching has experienced this campaign, so I don't want to unveil every single detail. Now that I'm done explaining it, on the quality of it, I would say that it's really done well. It's a really good espionage thriller, and I really love the fact that they connected it to World at War and Reznov's character. Alright, with the story done, I just want to quickly next knock out the graphics. The look of this game is very bright and smooth, almost to the point of it looking like a cartoon. This is also a clear inverse to the bulkiness that was the graphics in World at War, but bottom line, the game still looks great all these years later. Now to move on to the gameplay. I'll say that the gameplay is just your general modern first-person shooter again, but unlike the previous Call of Duties, I'll say that this one feels a little bit less stiff than the other ones. Like, I don't know if that makes sense. It feels like you have a bit more of a quicker character and looser, ability to look around. And although for the majority of this game it is just the general first-person shooter thing, I'll say that there are some really cool, unique sections in the campaign, such as when you're piloting a helicopter or the Blackbird. I mean, when you're in the Blackbird, it seems like you're playing a different type of game, like a light tactical thing where you're telling a squad of people what to do. As for the gameplay in the other game modes, Zombies basically plays the same as it did in the other game, but I'll get into it later. Getting into the multiplayer now, the gameplay for that is really, really fun. The gunplay is honestly better than their last outing, but probably not the best that they've ever done, but it's a significant increase. As for the multiplayer itself, it's really neat to see them go full-blown with the setting and have basically fun with it. I mean, there is the stuff that you expect here, like the weapons M16, M14, AK-47, but they're all their 60s variants. There is also the expected kill streaks, like dogs, helicopter, spy plane, but then there's all the stuff that is unique to this game. Like the maps. The maps are based around the setting from the campaign and just the decade in general. Like, there's a map that takes place in the rocket facility from one of the missions, and you could even get killed by one of the rockets going off. There's also a firing range, like, site, that's one of the more standout maps in this game. And finally, there is the obvious fan favorite, Nuketown, which is just a parody on, well, actual Nuketowns. Then you have who you play as on these maps, like obviously the Black Ops, the MAC-V, and the Swamp maps, the NVA as well, and even the Cuban Home Guard in the Cuba maps, all coming with their own themes and music that play throughout the match. Now we move on to the unique stuff of this game that you actually use, like the weapons, kill streaks, and equipment. Weapons like the Scorpion, Spectre, Infield, or the L98-1, or the crappier ones like the Stakeout, or the M60, or even the HK-21. Then we have the equipment, which I want to say was introduced in this game, but I'm not 100% sure on that. You had the motion sensor, which allowed you to see people on the map, the scrambler, which would prevent people from seeing their map if they were in range of it. You had the camera spike, which allowed you to put down a camera and just see that location, see if somebody like ran past it. And of course, you had the Claymore, which allowed you to just place it down and hopefully get an easy kill. And finally, we have the kill streaks, some of which included the SAM turret, which would shoot down enemy air support, the Valkyrie rocket, which was a rocket that you could actually control until it detonated, and as well as the RCXD, which is probably one of the more memorable ones, which was literally just an RC car with a piece of C4 stuck to it that you could detonate under someone. Now we'll move on to the new features that this game introduced into multiplayer, the most prominent of which are the COD points. A currency system that makes you have to unlock stuff twice, because once you hit a certain level to unlock something, you would have to then buy it with the COD points. But one positive aspect of this is the fact that when you unlock the weapon, you are basically given free range to unlock whichever attachments you want instead of having to level up the weapon. Now, unfortunately, regular matches didn't give out that many points, but fortunately there was a way to sort of remedy this. This was in the form of the new playlist Wager Matches, a place where you can risk it all and gamble your COD points at either a low, medium, or high rate. And in this playlist, you would not be playing the regular types of game modes, instead you would be playing the 4 brand new ones: Gun Game, Sticks and Stones, Sharpshooter, and One in the Chamber. These 4 game modes were very different from the regular game modes, as they were more like party games, as they would be later described as, since they were more unconventional. Like, Gun Game is, you would start with pistols, then you would get every kill you would get, you would move on to a different weapon until you ended up with the launchers and the ballistic knife, if I remember correctly. Sharpshooter was just completely random weapons with random attachments that swapped out every 45 seconds, and you can get perks every time you get a kill. Sticks and Stones was probably my least favorite because it only used the crossbow, the ballistic knives, and the hatchet. And there was finally One in the Chamber, which was really cool because it was one-hit kill and you only had one bullet for your weapon, and if you missed, you were just shit out of luck unless you could luckily knife someone. But every time you got a kill, you did get an extra bullet. Now, another fun part to these games was that 2 of them had a regression, sort of. Like, these were games for big money, and that meant you could try and do anything to win them. So in Sticks and Stones and Gun Game, Sticks and Stones, if you hit somebody with the hatchet, you would bankrupt them and make them lose all their points. And if you were to knife someone in Gun Game, that would revert them to the last gun. And when you're playing for, like, 100,000 COD points, people would get really pissed off if you did stuff like that. The next great addition to multiplayer was the theater mode. With this mode, you were able to watch previous matches that you were in from beginning to end from anyone's perspective or from the free cam perspective. You were also able to save games so that way you would never lose them, as well as create clips and screenshots, both of which could have been uploaded to the community tab, where there you could also see many other of people's clips and screenshots. I always remember the screenshots being like these funny pictures of the dogs like looking weird and people running around with modded camos for their weapons. The next thing we are moving on to is the fact that this is the first game with creatable emblems, and a very detailed one at that, since you have so many layers to work with and so many pictures to choose from. And I remember people's emblems that ranged from really cool to really funny to really inappropriate. And staying on the topic of customization, this was the first game where you could change your soldier's appearance, as his outfit would change based on which first perk you would choose, and you were able to buy and put on face paint. Another neat piece of customization was the fact that you were able to change the color of your red dot if you were using it, or the lens color, or even the shape of the reticle itself. It's a small thing, but that was pretty cool. Now we are on to the final major addition to the multiplayer, which is the combat training. This game mode, as the name intends, sees you going up against AI training bots. Bots that not only bared the names of your friends, but also were able to be set at the 4 difficulty options from the campaign, meaning that your opponents can range from mentally retarded to full-blown pinpoint accurate Terminators. Now I don't know if training on this was actually worth it, since an AI would play differently than an actual player. Well, actually, you would be able to learn the map, so I guess it was partially worth it. But regardless, if anything, this was a really neat idea to add in. With all the new features out of the way, there's only one thing left to talk about with the multiplayer, and that is how it was during its heyday, or at least what I remember from its heyday. And I remember it being just a genuine great time. You know, getting together with my friends and us going off to play objective-based game modes together, and hoping that one of the maps in the selection was a good one to vote on, which I'm only just now realizing was also introduced in this game, since the other ones always had the skip option. So yeah, we would play our damnedest against the enemy team. Most of the time we would win, sometimes it would come down to the wire, and we would lose as well, but not as often. But in the end, there would always be trash talk against the two teams when it was all over, especially on Search and Destroy. Now, I personally don't remember this game being as toxic as MW2. I mean, the only quote that I remember comes from a game that ended with a final kill cam where a guy lunged knife like way too far, and somebody yelled out, "This isn't Halo, but that was a reach." And the same kind of goes for the weapons, since there was really nothing that overpowered. I mean, the only 2 weapons that come to mind are the FAMAS, which was easy to get around since it was an assault rifle, and the Spaz, which, yeah, no, that thing was very annoying. And every once in a while you would get a game with someone who has it golden and is just running around spamming the thing with a probably modded controller, allowing them to just shoot it as many times as they want. But other than that, nothing really comes to mind, and I think that just about wraps up the multiplayer. Now all that's left to be discussed is the zombie mode, but before I do that, I want to just quickly knock out the music for this game. And I would say that overall, the music perfectly encapsulates the game's theme of espionage. I also love how they used violins in some of these tracks, especially since I can't really think of another game that uses that instrument. But one thing I really gotta say is that I love the fact that they used real songs in the campaign from the decade. They used, if I remember correctly, Symphony for the Devil from the Rolling Stones, and Fortunate Son from CCR. I also really enjoy the intenseness of the aforementioned multiplayer music for each of the individual teams, as they all have a different type of sound to portray the current multiplayer match going on. And continuing on, we now have the Zombies music, which, starting off, is the new Zombies theme. It's an eerie theme that only consists of a few piano notes that seems to get more aggressive over time. Today I would say that it's not only one of the most iconic Call of Duty songs, but probably one of the most iconic songs in all of video gaming. Next we have the songs for the new Perca-Cola drinks, and just like before, they're all in a different genre. Let me see if I can get this correct. Stamina Up has a jazzy tune, Deadshot has a hard rock tune, Mule Kick has a Spanish song, and PhD has a disco tune. Next we have the neat little intro songs to the maps when you play on solo, but they're pretty short and sweet, so there's really nothing to talk about with them. The same is true for the little pieces of retro music that play throughout Dead Ops. Finally, we have the Easter egg songs, which not only sees the return of the use of heavy metal as well as the singer Alina Sigmund for some of the songs, but also the introduction of newcomers Avenged Sevenfold, as well as a wild card in an Eminem song. As for the quality of the songs themselves, I would say that just about all of them are good. The only ones I would say I don't like are Shangri-La's and Moon's first song. Alright, now with the Zombies music out of the way, let's actually talk about how the game mode plays. Now to start off with, the base of this game mode was more or less built up to its apex in World at War. You had the point system, the ability to buy weapons, the mystery box, the perks, the power switch, the wonder weapons, and even the Easter egg side quests. Oh, and I can't forget about the power-ups, or the traps, all of which was slowly introduced across the 4 maps. Now, what Treyarch did in Black Ops with this game mode was not only expand upon the base concept, but also they experimented with it a little. Expansion in the way of new maps, new wonder weapons, new perks, and even new characters. Some of these new maps include 5, which sees JFK, Richard Nixon, Robert McNamara, and Fidel Castro surviving a zombie invasion in the Pentagon, or Shangri-La, which sees the 4 original characters trying to survive a tropical undead nightmare. Alright, now we have the 4 new perks, the first of which is Stamina Up. It allows you to run quicker and longer. Next we have arguably the second best perk next to Juggernaut, which is PhD Flopper, as it allows you to shoot explosive weapons without being hurt, as well as make a huge explosion if you dolphin dive off of a ledge. Oh, and you also don't take any fall damage. Next is Deadshot Daiquiri, which is alright. It just makes you aim for headshots more and gives you steady aim. And then you have one of my personal favorites, Mule Kick, which allows you to hold 3 weapons. But considering how much it is, I can see why people would not like it, especially since if you get down, you lose your 3rd weapon. And there is also not a new perk, but a new function to a perk, which is the ability to get 3 free revives from Quick Revive when you're playing in solo. Finally, we are on to the new wonder weapons, some of which include the Thunder Gun, which shoots out a huge blast of air that blows over all the zombies and kills them. The Scavenger, which shoots out explosive sniper bolts, and the Baby Gun, with the really weird name, like the actual name, because everyone just calls it the Baby Gun, which just shrinks down all the zombies and you can just walk right over them. Alright, now we'll talk about what they experimented with in this game, and what better way to start that than probably the most experimental piece of it, which is Dead Ops Arcade. I mean, heck, the way you're supposed to even unlock it is pretty experimental. On the main menu, you are able to escape the torture chair, and from there find a computer, and if you type in the letters DOA on it, Boom. There you go. Now, Dead Ops Arcade, as you can currently see, is a lot less of a map, per se, and more of its own game mode. It's a dual-stick arcade shooter in the same vein as something like Robotron or Smash TV, and it sees 4 soldiers going on an epic quest to defeat the evil cosmic Silverback. And throughout this quest, there is much gold to be collected, power-ups to get, locations to be visited, and a whole lot of zombies to kill. And just to think, this was only the beginning. Another big piece of experimentation, which actually started a little bit in the last game, was giving this game mode an actual, story. A story about an evil organization, an element that can bring back the dead, 2 rival scientists, 3 test subjects dragged along for the ride, and an evil little girl that's behind it all. Just throw in the Nazis, time travel, and a trip to the moon, and you have yourself one hell of a tale. Alright, now on to the next thing they experimented with, which was the new boss zombies and how much of a hindrance they could be. Alright, first was the Pentagon Thief, who could take your weapon and keep it if you aren't able to kill him, and you're just shit out of luck. Next was the Monkeys, which went after your perks, and if you had all 4 of your perks, you wouldn't be able to protect all of them, because it could be across, the whole map. Next one was the really big one in George Romero, which was just one big, huge zombie with a huge amount of health that would, if you were to accidentally shoot him, he would, get mad and then chase after you. It's really hard to deal with them. And then there was the 2 on the Shangri-La map, the Shrieker and the Napalm Zombie, but the Shrieker was fine. It was the Napalm Zombie who would fuck you over, because if you were to get too close to him, he would just erupt and then leave a whole bunch of fire on the ground. And then we have the final one, which was the astronaut on Moon, and you would kill him, and every time he respawns, he would get more tougher, more health, and if he were to grab you, he would not only teleport you to a random location, but he would also take away a perk. Now, I know killing some of these guys would get you something, like if you were to kill the Pentagon Thief before he took your weapon, he would get a bonfire sale, which makes the Pack-a-Punch only $1,000, which is really useful, but really hard to get. And I know if you kill George, you get a free perk, but that's a really long process. Next, we have probably the most experimental regular map made by Treyarch, Moon, and that is for the simple fact that it is a map with low gravity. I mean, they took the gamble of fighting zombies in space, and I would say it paid off greatly. It's really cool to bounce around, to move faster, as well as needing to get a spacesuit in order to go out into the surface of the moon or depressurized areas. But on the other hand, I could also see why some people don't like these aspects, as well as the map itself, but regardless, it's still a really cool map. Finally, we are now on to easily the most experimental piece of the main zombie mode, which is the Easter egg side quests, as they have evolved far from just needing to find a book or play hide and seek. I mean, this game will see you needing to shoot a bunch of explosions into a black hole, activate a set of radios in a certain order based off their frequencies, match 2 sets of tiles on 2 different parts of a map, and play Simon Says. And not to leave out one of my personal favorite steps in one of these, which is to turn a zombie back into a human and kill him before he is abducted by aliens. And all these Easter eggs are used to drive the crazy plot to its even crazier conclusion, which I won't spoil here, even though you probably know what it is already. Alright, now that that's done, now to discuss my experience with this game mode. To start off with, I would say I very much dislike playing it solo. I didn't like having the zombies only be focused on me, I didn't like the fact that you could only get downed a certain amount of times, and it was just Overall, just way too hard and lonely since this was a game mode meant for 4 people. So, just like multiplayer, I would get together with my friends and we would play some rounds on whatever map we were feeling that day. But that was only some of the time. Most of the time usually was just me or with one other friend going into random public lobbies. That was because it was just honestly really fun to go out and meet random people online. You know, see if they were a cool dude or an asshole, see if they played well or awfully, see if they stay after their first down or immediately leave, see if they open the right doors or the wrong doors, or even see if this was a match where we were gonna do the Easter egg, and maybe make a few new friends along the way. I mean, just the general grab bagness of it was just really a fun concept to me, and I really do miss this because today, if you play zombies in one of the modern games, nobody talks. Like, just nobody. I mean, even if they have a mic plugged in, they don't use it. Why do you have it plugged in then? Alright, for the final section, we're going to move on to something less personal, since this is probably something that everyone experienced at one point, which is the many dumb myths that were scattered throughout this game mode. You know, stuff like trying to find references in the campaign or multiplayer to zombies or vice versa, flopping in the corner to get more power-ups, the zombies becoming more aggressive during the music, the ladder lowering in Kino when you get to a certain round, the belief of Shangri-La being set on Mars, and I'm not even sure about this one still, the fact that whenever you kill the astronaut, it's said that the digger's order will reset. And I'm just remembering now, there's also the one where if you turn on the power as Richtofen, Tunnel 6 would be the first one, or more likely to be the first one. These are the few that I could think up off the top of my head, since there's obviously a whole bunch more that I didn't list here. Although in the end, some of us did believe in them and some of us didn't, it was still fun trying to debunk or confirm them. Alright, that concludes the discussion on the zombie mode. Now all that's left to do is my final thoughts on the game as a whole. Unfortunately for this conclusion, I really have nothing new to say. I mean, this truly was Treyarch's big breakout game. I mean, this is the game that finally legitimized them to contend with Infinity Ward. And not to mention the fact that this is literally the base for every single Call of Duty made by Treyarch after this, since they're all in the Black Ops series, whether that is for better or worse. But still, if we were to ignore what it did for the future and just judge it as its own game, I would still say that it's phenomenal. But unfortunately, that status of phenomenal is challenged due to the fact that nobody plays the online anymore. I mean, you could still play with friends on a private match in Zombies, or maybe even find a lobby if you're lucky, but the multiplayer, you're basically shit out of luck. The best you're probably gonna do is the combat training, or if you're really lucky, have a bunch of friends get together in a private match, just like Zombies. But even then, it's not the same experience than when the game was alive. I mean, it is unfortunate and it does damage the overall rating, but I mean, no game is popular forever. Makes me truly happy that I played it when I did, and it makes me feel sorry for the people that didn't. I mean, it sucks ending this video on such a downer note, but that's just the way it is. Well, although the online was temporary, at least the memories are forever. Hey, you know that computer that you can access after escaping the chair? Well, it turns out that there's a lot more stuff on there than just Dead Ops Arcade. One of the more well-known things is the fact that you could play the old computer game Zork on it, but the lesser-known stuff includes, like, being able to go into people's emails, ranging from, like, JFK or Richard Nixon, to the main characters in the game, like Woods or Masons even. And there's even secret notes to be found, like the one that foreshadows the sequel by telling you that Woods had survived the explosion. Pretty neat, huh?